Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin
and pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today. How are you doing, Dr. Virginia?
Good. How are you? Excited to have a guest with us today.
We have our first guest. It's exciting.
So we have Pastor Ray, Dr. Ray Summerlin, who's going to be here, who is known as the recruiting extraordinaire, the delegating extraordinaire. He's going to be here today sharing how we recruit key leaders, how we delegate to them, how we hold our key leaders accountable. So just a lot about putting in place key leaders in our ministry. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Pastor Ray? Dr. Ray.
Well, I start off with, was born in Rhoda, Spain, grew up in a military family. My dad was a Marine officer for over 30 years. And so I grew up in that environment. I grew up with a Marine infantry officer leading me and teaching me, my best man in my wedding when Beth and I got married 36 years ago. And so learned a lot from my family, grew up in a Christian home. Trusted Christ at 12, and then later got the call to ministry after several tours in the Marine Corps, and was kind of scary and wasn't something I was planning on, and planned on being a Marine officer for years, and surrendered to the ministry and ended up going to Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, where Dr. Virginia got her doctorate degree. I got my master's and later my doctorate from there, and then said I would never be a Navy chaplain, and for many reasons, and for all the other reasons is why I became a Navy chaplain. So I was able to learn some other things in my time as a chaplain for 14 years on top of my 12 years in the Marine Corps. And in between, after that, I've been retired over 10 years. I've served in local churches, did in and out of the Marine Corps and the Navy years ago. I think I've served in 5 different churches, mostly education, administration roles. And I've been a vice president at a university, and also served as a recruiting officer at seminary. So that's my background. I have a lot of recruiting background, a lot of leadership background. And so all that is my life learning lessons. And so I've been able to put all that education, all the experience together. And today I just also I did my doctoral work, which doctoral work, as Virginia knows, and personality typing. So I use that very much so in my recruiting efforts and delegating. Understanding people's personality type is very key for me and my leadership, and how I work a team, how I lead, and how I recruit people, most definitely.
Wow, that's
been married to Beth for 36 years, have 3 adult children. They're all married and have 2 granddaughters. And so that is a little bit about me now. I currently serve as an interim executive pastor at a church I served at before. And that's been a lot of fun, a lot of neat experiences. And there was a need there, and they asked me to come help them. And so I've been doing that. And that's been a great joy.
I'm excited, Pastor Ray, that you're with us today, because actually in one of our last episodes, we were talking about how many children's ministers know how to work with children, and they know about education for children and games for children and all of that. But a huge part of a children's minister's job is administration. It's recruiting volunteers, training volunteers. And so I'm really excited that you're joining us today, because I'm excited about being able to sort of glean more information from you for the people that are following us, to be able to hear some suggestions and ideas on better ways to find and develop leadership, because that's something that we're not always prepared to do when we walk into children's ministry.
Mm-hmm. Amen. One of the things I think of, first of all, it's an analogy. I coached over 50 some sports teams in my life. I was a phys ed major in undergraduate school. And one of the things I learned early on in coaching Little League was there's 3 things you have to know. And most people just think there's 2. They think you have to work well with children. You have to understand their cognitive abilities. And then you have to know, the sport that you're coaching. And if they know the children and they know the sport, they think this is easy. Well, my philosophy is the first thing you need to do is you need to know how to work with adults. You need to know how to lead adults. You need to know how to recruit adults, and you need to know how to hold them accountable, that being their parents. If you can do that and you know a little bit about baseball or soccer and you know a little bit about children, you'll be much more successful in little league sports, is knowing how to lead, direct, and delegate those parents to get them involved in the process. And so that's just a simple analogy I learned years ago. I had a little checklist. Every time I coached a sports team, I changed the name and I went right down this little checklist to get all the parents involved. And from a snack lady to a year-end party person to a team mom to someone ordering the jerseys, someone helping me score keep. I had a list of about 12 tasks. So I had a parent that had everything. Every one of them had some way to be involved in the team. So that's very similar to children's ministry as well. You've got to, they're going to love the children in most cases, but they're a lot of times they're not going to understand how to recruit leaders and how to identify those leaders. So I'm sure that's where you guys want to springboard and ask me some questions in that area.
Yeah, I mean, the very first question. So how do you find and recruit those key leaders to whom we can delegate some responsibility? How do we find those people?
Well, you start within, you start with who you have already. You often, at a previous church, Virginia and I served at, there was a key leader that I got there, and they were wonderful Sunday school teachers. But I noticed that they worked really well together. And whenever you have a couple Sunday school teacher in grade school ages, there's always one or the other that takes the lead. Right. Well, I noticed that they were both involved. Both the man and the wife were intricately involved in teaching those children. And so I thought, well, maybe they would be great directors, but they had been teaching for like 15 years. And so I just sat down with them and had a meeting and told them what the need was and said, would y'all consider being directors? Because they could equip the leaders, because you're often bringing in new people that are teaching Sunday school. And so you can use them as lay leaders to teach. This is how I taught. This is how we organized. This is how we kept the role. And then if you can get someone like that for a children's minister or a preschool minister, someone that's a solid lay leader director, and then you can work with that. And it really takes a burden off the children's minister when you have someone like that in leadership roles. So you want to identify multiple folks from Awana to missions to your preschool nursery coordinator. You've got to find those leaders that have maybe come from within the system. They may be more valuable in a leadership position. But then also I have found sometimes you can go completely outside the ministry. When I was at one church, when I first retired from the military over 10 years ago, I got to know this one couple, and this one lady was a principal at a school. And I noticed her administrative gifts. I noticed she was great at communicating with people because she was a principal. So she knew how to do conflict resolution, conflict management. She knew how to communicate. She had a pleasant personality, but she also was a leader personality. I knew her personality type. I knew a little bit about her. So I brought her in with her husband and I asked, would you consider being my preschool Sunday school director? And she said, no, I don't like preschoolers. That's why I only had one child. and said, that's why she's, older now and we're only having one. So you've got the wrong person, and kind of grabs the handles on the chair in my office and said, is that all you needed? Because this isn't going to work. And I said, no, ma'am, have a seat, sit back and relax. I've got some more discussion with her. And I told her, I said, I don't need you as the preschool Sunday school director to work with the preschoolers. Right. I need you to be able to lead adults. And her husband goes, well, she can do that. And I said, well, that's why she's sitting here right now, brother. And so I got her involved and she committed to doing it. And she ended up doing it 2 years. I asked her for a 1-year commitment, which you try not to ask for too long of a commitment. That's very important. I think y'all discussed that in your previous show. But so I asked her to commit for a year and she ended up doing it 2 years. And she was absolutely wonderful. We had to change some attitudes and some policies and some ways of doing things. And so she was a total fresh look. And she walked in that preschool Sunday school. And Sunday school was running 50 to 70 preschoolers and teachers. And she was able to turn it upside down, get it accountable. And they loved her. The teachers loved her. The parents loved her. And so you can recruit from within your ministry. And then you can also, sometimes you can find someone totally unassociated with preschool and children's ministry especially in a leadership role or administrative role, that can help you. And you can find it effective in both ways. It's almost like recruiting a children's minister. At the church I currently serve, we have Virginia, who's got a master's and a doctorate in education, and then we have another children's minister that has no formal education whatsoever. So, and she was groomed from within the church, and she is absolutely wonderful. Has years of experience now. I hired her over 10 years ago, and so it's a wonderful balance. So you take someone from within the ministry, and then someone without that maybe has the education like this principal did and had the skill set. And so you can find them in both places, from within the ministry and from outside your specific children's ministry. So that's one of the things I've always tried to keep in mind when I'm looking for those key leaders.
What are some of the traits that you're looking for when you are looking for that key leader position? You talked about a few little things there, but what are some of the specific things that you're really looking for?
Well, besides the personality type and their passion, traits I'm looking for is I'm looking for someone. I am a Marine, and the word courage comes to mind. I've got to have someone that's a leader that has courage, to where they know to do the right thing, and so they're not afraid of conflict if they need to be. Also looking for commitment. Is this person committed to the ministry of the local church? Are they involved? And try to make sure they're not overcommitted, but that they can focus. So get someone that has courage, that has commitment, and someone that has good people skills. Yes, you need administrators, but you don't want an administrator that's going to be so rough with people it's going to run people off. So you got to have somebody with that commitment level, that courage, and a little compassion, a little bit of people skills as well. So that's very important. And I'm looking for that sometimes more so than I am talent. Talent is always important, but if I could find someone that's committed and that's compassionate and has a little courage to do the right thing, we can go a long way. And so that's some of the things I'm looking for, besides their passion and besides their personality type, because I try to match people's personality. I don't want to create a personality conflict, which is real easy to do with administrative leaders. You don't want them knocking heads with each other. You want them to be able to complement each other.
And, this is one tip that you've given me in the past and that you kind of mentioned. So, like you said, you recruited a principal, and one of the things that you've told me is looking at what they do vocationally. Now, there are lots of people who maybe do all kinds of things vocationally and would still be good in leadership. But a lot of times that's a good key that you've mentioned in the past, like looking at what people do vocationally. And if they're a leader in their work throughout the week, then they probably had a lot of skill development that we can also apply in the church setting.
Yeah, like that leader we talked about, that children's leader that became a Sunday school director. I found out he was in a supervisory role with a company and for years, and he had just retired. But yes, vocationally understanding their background can be very important. But one of the things I also have learned is, you've got the spiritual gift of teaching. Everybody that teaches doesn't have to have the spiritual gift of teaching. Everybody that works in administration doesn't necessarily have to have the spiritual gift. They may have other talents and passions and background to where they can do other things where they're not spiritually gifted. If you can get them spiritually gifted in that area, that's always great. But finding people with their background, for example, I'm a school teacher, so I would make a great teacher. Wrong, not always the right answer. Being a school teacher in a public school or even a Christian or private school is a lot different than being a preschool or children's Sunday school teacher. So there's some skill sets that are transferable, but there's some that can be very, very negative. And one of them is, I can manage a classroom of 35 kids. Well, yeah, you're expected to do that in a public school, but that's the furthest thing we want in a children's ministry. We got 35 people in there. We want 5 or 6 adults in there at a minimum. And so understanding their background, their vocation is very important. And so I do look at that a lot. And a lot of people work in very administrative areas. They have IT experience and they work in administrative areas. So when you're looking for directors and those type leaders, I look with people, those IT skills, they have those director background or some type of supervision. They're not, a delivery person that did very successful for years, but they were very customer service oriented, but they didn't manage people at all. All they had to do was manage their schedule. And sometimes those people can be closet leaders, but I've historically found that if they haven't done that for 30 or 40 years, delivering stuff or sales, sometimes it doesn't work. but sometimes it does. So I do try to look at that area and try to know as much about the person as possible before I sit down and meet with them. And then when I do meet with them, I think Dr. Virginia mentioned this too. I do have several options for them. I try not to put a round circle in a square hole. I try to say, okay, I usually try to use the number 3. A good preacher has 3 points. And so I try to come in there with 3 different options. And sometimes it may be a preschool position, a children's position, or adult position. Or I may know they've already told someone that they want to work with children. So I may give them an Awana opportunity, a missions opportunity, and a Sunday school opportunity. And some may be leadership, some may be teaching. So I try to give them the opportunity to choose instead of trying to corner them in a spot that they may not be happy with.
Right.
And if you can get them in a spot to where they want to join, and sometimes they may want to do something that you don't have a spot for, make a spot for them.
Right.
Get them plugged into their giftedness, their passion, and then just trust God for the open gaps. And don't put someone somewhere just because you have a hole. You're better off going without. I have learned that. That's just been something I've learned through the years. I'd rather go without. Sometimes I've waited a year before I found a Sunday school director because I wanted to find the right person.
Right. Right. Well, we talked about that once before. I think Virginia and I have about if you're going to force somebody to feel like they have to do something that they don't feel comfortable with or that they don't feel that they can do, then everyone around them are going to be miserable, just as miserable as they are. So
Absolutely.
I think it's making sure you're not forcing something to happen that's not meant to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I may tolerate it a little bit in the preschool extended session, but in most other places I might not tolerate it. But I generally have an expectation that they will serve, and so trying to find them the right leader to work with them, because oftentimes you'll have more than one leader in there. So those that are a little cranky or not as excited about serving with the 2-year-olds, get someone that has a lot of great joy and leadership, and let their enthusiasm become contagious. So I put those folks that are a little more hesitant and cautious, I try to match them up with someone that can be a strong mentor indirectly through their encouragement, their smile, their ability to work with little ones.
Yeah. That's always been one of my challenges, because if I have teachers that have worked together for a very long time and they're both super strong and they've just gotten very comfortable working together, I really try to encourage them to let me split them up with new leaders so that they can encourage. But a lot of times they don't want to give up that comfortable partner. Yeah.
Well, that's where courage comes in. Yeah, sometimes you have to have the courage to make the tough decisions, and sometimes they can go south. And so you have to be very discerning. You have to commit it to prayer and say, okay, is this a couple that we need to split? And I've seen that. I've experienced that as well, to where, hey, I need y'all to split up, because I've done it with upward football, for example, with children's upward football. Hey, I know you guys love working together. I need y'all to mentor these other younger men, these dads, and so sometimes I've been successful, sometimes I've not, but I certainly try to, and that's a great point, and that's tough, and we're not always successful, but at least have the courage to try, and try to take a soft approach, and see if they'll bite. If not, just back up and say, okay, we'll be okay.
Well, I want to launch into a question that's sort of the $1 million question. So let's say we've recruited our key leaders. We've got it figured out who's got the skill set. How do you know what to delegate to your key leaders, to your Sunday school director or your Awana director, whoever it is?
Well, I'll say this with humility, and it's because people call me this, but I'm a master delegator. So I love to delegate, but I also am careful, very careful, and very strategic at what I delegate and what I don't delegate. So some things I delegate when I know they have the personality, the giftedness, and the experience to handle it. And one of the many things I learned in the Marine Corps and from Marine Corps experience is one of the most important leadership traits or leadership principles is the word supervision. So when you delegate, you've got to, Virginia knows I have a master Outlook calendar, master Outlook taskbar. And so when I delegate things, I put them on my calendar, I put them on my taskbar, and I'm following back up with it. But you have to discern slowly, start off slow and see, what that person can do, whether it's, let's see if they can handle the schedule. Let's see if they can handle making sure the background checks get done. And maybe the background checks are not coming in as frequently as you like. So sit down and meet with that person and talk with them. And, Virginia knows I expect, 3 to 5 new workers recruited a month. And when you have a nursery of 60 to 100 folks, which is historically where we've served, you've got to be recruiting 3, 4, 5 a month. And so I'm getting those background checks. And if I don't see 3, 4, or 5 background checks, I'm going, Dr. Virginia, where's some background checks? Or Miss So-and-so, I need to have these background checks coming in. And then after a while, when I see that they've got the knack of it, I'm not worried about it as much. And so you have to pick and choose. It's not the same for everybody. You've got to look at that person's skill set, their administrative background, their experience, their confidence level, and you just have to delegate slowly. And so I try not to delegate too much. I don't consider myself a micromanager, but I very much know how to do it. If I have to, if someone's not able to take and run with delegated authority, then I micromanage them until I get them to the point where they can get up and run and walk on their own. So I try to use the crawl, walk, run theory. Give them something small, and as they begin to crawl with it, give them something to walk with, and then before you know it, they're running. And then once you get them running, you're able to spend more time with other leaders. The more you can delegate successfully, and the more you can empower your leaders, the more you can get done. That's one of the things I've learned. You cannot be in a thriving, growing children's ministry or anything that you're trying to grow and reach more people if you cannot delegate successfully. And you got to find the folks that can follow. And then eventually they learn to delegate what you're delegating. And so that duplication, that discipleship process begins to take place. But yeah, it's tricky. You've got to, some people are just real good at certain things and some people are not. And that includes myself, so I know the things that I'm not as strong at as an administrator, as an educator. And so, you know what I do? I delegate some of those things out. So also I've learned to delegate things that are not my strengths as well to people with that have strengths different than me. And so I'm not afraid of that. I'm pretty secure in my person. Thankfully for the home I grew up in, my relationship with Christ, and just the life experiences I have. But I know where I'm not strong, and so I learned to delegate in some of those areas as well.
Yeah, have to realize we can't do it all, can we? We evolve and given gifts and strengths and abilities, and we are meant to work together with people, and that's part of how we were created. But it's hard to admit sometimes when you don't think you do something very well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about holding key leaders accountable. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, they're volunteers. So it's like we kind of have to just take what we can get, and we can't really hold them accountable in meaningful ways because they're not like employees. But how do we hold our key leaders accountable?
Wow, that is a tough part of ministry. And that's where that other C word we talked about earlier comes into play, is courage. And so we have to hold them accountable. And sometimes you can let things slide for a while, but eventually you're going to have to hold them accountable, and you're going to have to, confront in a gracious, godly way and say, hey, the roster was due to me 3 days ago. It's late. Are you having problems with it? Or is there something I can do to help you? I need this roster turned into either myself or this education secretary or this receptionist. And I know it's not here. And so what's going on? How can I help you? And so holding them accountable is the harder part. You walk into a classroom and you see the 2 teachers are over there sitting there talking, and the third one's over there on the phone. And so you kind of got to walk out, and you got to regroup and come back in and say, pull the leader aside and say, hey, we need to make sure we're engaged with the children. And so you can't if you allow that behavior to go, then all you're going to do is complicate your life as a leader. And so you have to confront it. You have to have courage, but you got to have some grace. And so that is a tough area. But I'm a firm believer, as Virginia knows, you've got to confront those areas, because if you don't, you're just going to create more problems for yourself. And so the longer you let it linger, the worse of a problem it's going to become, because you're enabling that behavior, and you're enabling that poor leadership skills. So if you see something you're not happy with, you definitely have to confront it, and you have to hold them accountable. And I believe in the old the old adage, which is not very common, you can fire volunteers. So you can.
You do.
You've got to
Yeah.
find ways to do that, and you can do it graciously.
Right.
First of all, I always try to reassign them. If I can reassign them, say, hey, I've got a greater need in this area. And so that's my first tactic always, is to try to find another place of ministry that they can serve. And so that way, that way they don't feel like they were, quote, fired. But yeah, sometimes you just I've had to do it, with youth leaders one time, and just say, hey, this is not your husband's strength. He's in there because you're in there, and I need a couple that's both engaged. And well, I'm trying to be supportive of my wife, and so I appreciate that, but you're obviously not comfortable in there. We need to find another place for y'all to serve. And so you just have to confront it. If not, it continues to go, and people talk. There's the chatter going on. And so that is the toughest area. And I have found great success if you can laterally transition them to another place of ministry, or you can replace them. You're going to reduce your problem. But as long as you enable the behavior, it's just like with your children at home. As long as you enable it, you're going to continue to have the same problems. And so, and you're going to continue to stagnate as a ministry. If you want a growing, vibrant ministry, you need to be making changes, and you need to be making challenges. You need to be hiring new leaders, and you need to be rotating them around. And it's so easy to get dormant and complacent. And we've got to be proactive, and whether it's children or youth, and we need to be proactive in all areas of ministry. And if not, you get complacent. Next thing you know, you're the old saying, if you're stagnant, you're not growing. If you're just cruising along, you're really not growing. You're declining.
Right.
So you've got to be moving forward. If not, you're moving backwards. There's no such thing as being idle. Whenever you get idle in ministries, whether it's children's ministry, preschool ministry, any type ministry, whenever you're idle, it's not good. You need to be getting new leaders, new adult leaders, and new directors, and change the format. And I'm a strong proponent of that. Don't keep everybody there. And even someone that can be there for a long time, they could be ever changing. They can be challenged. And if you got leaders like that, keep them. I'm not saying you need to throw out everybody. You need to, those that are committed and strong and are fruitful, and they're discipling other leaders, keep those folks. But having rotation of people, especially with preschool and children's ministry, you've got that 10 or 20% that just love it and do it for 40, 50, 60 years. I've been in churches where they've done it till they're in their 80s and 90s.
Oh yeah.
And they're wonderful at it.
Great.
And so try to get them other women in there, other couples that they can mentor. And but yeah, if they're effective, no need to make a change. But if they're not effective, you got to have the courage to confront it.
Well, I think it's human nature that we want to put off difficult conversations.
Oh,
And we always hope that things are going to get better. But it's been my experience that things tend to just get worse. And also, if you wait too long to have those conversations, instead of being able to proactively help someone to do better, we tend to get them so frustrated that they want to leave without even changing to another possibility or working on what their issue might be, because it's gone on for so long now. They're frustrated. They just want to walk away.
They're like, from their perspective, they're like, why is this all of a sudden an issue?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm a type, I'm quick to run to the fire with the hose and put the fire out. And so I try to surround myself with other leaders that are maybe more slow to respond, and use that balance to where I'm not always trying to make decisions by myself. I'm working with a preschool minister or children's minister or a preschool Sunday school leader or someone like that. And I'm asking them, what do you think we need to do? We've got an issue here with this couple. How long do we let it go? And well, I think, Pastor Ray, I think we need to address it, but I don't want to address it, And so, or I say, I think we need to run to it. And then Virginia says, I think we need to wait a little bit. And so you have to be willing to listen, and you've got to understand your style. I am generally not afraid of conflict and confrontation. Do I like having to do it? Absolutely not. But if it has to be done, Virginia knows I will do it. And much more quickly than most your average minister, I would say, and not in a boastful way, but probably not in a great way. But I'm more willing to run to conflict and resolve it. And that's why I end up doing a lot of what I do in churches, because I'm the type person that's willing to do that.
Right.
But I do it with prayer and try to be soft. I'm softer today than I was 30 years ago. I hope I'm softer today than I was yesterday.
Right.
But you have to confront it, and it's not always easy.
No.
What are some simple tips for hard conversations, with anyone or with key leaders?
Yeah, the first is prayer.
Amen.
Bring them in. Say, I love you. I appreciate you guys. You guys are doing a wonderful job with the 2-year-olds, and we're so thankful for y'all. And I just want to open this up with a word of prayer and pray with them and ask them, hey, how's things at home? How's things with the job? How's things, with the ball team you're coaching? So try to draw a relationship with them instead of cutting into the chase pretty
Right.
quickly. And so they need to, the old saying, they don't know how much they need to know that you care. And if they know you care and you love them, they're more likely to listen and follow.
Right.
So I try to draw that type connection. If I don't have it already, sometimes I have it already, and I say, hey, I can cut to the chase a little quicker with this person because he knows I love him. He knows what I want. He knows my style. But that's what I try to do is try to have that word of prayer with them, pray with them, tell them you want what's best for the ministry. Hey, the best thing for the ministry right now is I need y'all working in the adult department, and y'all have served in 2-year-olds for 2 years. I appreciate that. And you don't even have to always address the exact problem. If you can transition them out of there, you could say, we just want you to, we need you over here in the adult department, and would y'all consider that? And so tell them what the need is, and once again, have 2 or 3 options for them if you can. And so when you have those tough conversations, you gotta bathe it in prayer. Be willing to put the foot on the brake for people like me to slow down and really think through the process, and just demonstrate my love and care for them, and realize that they're gifted and they're capable to serve in so many different ways. A lot of times, I mean, you'd have told me, 40 years ago that I would be a minister of the gospel, I would have said, you're crazy, but you have to be coached along. You have to be encouraged. You have to allow the Holy Spirit to work in your life, and you've got to embrace that with folks you talk to. And so I found that very important. Unfortunately, I've had to fire people in military and universities and within the local church, and done a whole lot of it in little league sports, coaching that through the years. Right. Say, Mom, I appreciate you doing this. I need to have someone else do this. You seem to be a little stressed, and you seem to be a little frustrated getting the snack schedule. So I'm just, so-and-so's agreed to take this snack schedule, and you enjoy watching the game, and I'll let you know if I need some help in other areas. And so, because if not, she's just creating a cancer cell disruption amongst the team. And teamwork is so important in everything you do, whether it's with the staff, whether it's within your children's ministry or preschool ministry. You got to create a sense of team amongst the people. They know who's teaching in the 4-year-olds next to them, and they're 3-year-olds, and they know who's in the 2-year-old room next to them, and they've got to communicate and share resources, and you've got to promote that, and you've got to encourage that. And if you can encourage a team to work together, you got less problems with conflict, less problems with having those hard conversations.
Right. I love the way that you talked about that, starting with prayer and being encouraging, and starting with that positive conversation and relationship, because relationship is what it's all about, right? We want to have a relationship with people, and we want to reach people in that way, because it's so easy when we have these hard conversations that we want to just jump in because we want to get it over with.
Yeah.
And so, but one of the things that I learned from doing evaluations with teachers in a school setting was that I always tried to give them 2 positives before I had to hit that negative area of improvement, so that they knew that I was seeing them as a whole person, that I was seeing the good things that they were doing, and I saw some things that needed improvement. And so it's starting off with that relationship that I think is so important.
Yes. Virginia and I both had a guy named Dr. Ken Coley, and he would emphasize that, but he would always talk about, find the positives, find something good to say before you give that negative. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Love Dr. Coley.
Yeah, he's a treat.
He is.
So what can we, as people who lead ministries, do to develop ourselves as leaders? What are things that we can do to become better leaders?
Well, one, read books on leadership. I read about leadership. Get on email lists where they talk about leadership, where they talk about um, type character traits you need. Find a mentor, and then find a mentee. So I've got lateral guys that are in ministry that I consider lateral. Some of them consider me more of a mentor, but I consider them laterals where I just call and talk to them. I have lived all over the world with my life experiences. I've got friends from seminary that are missionaries that I went to seminary with 25, 30 years ago. I got folks that I went through the doctoral program that are principals, and I still communicate to those people. I've got Marine Corps friends that were strong Christians. I got missionaries when I lived in Japan. I called one the other night, 80 some years old, still pastoring a church. And so try to find those folks that you look up to, and then also people that you can feed into. It took me a long while to where I had the confidence to where I could reach down to someone. And next thing you know, they're following you naturally. And you just got to be an encouragement to them. But read, follow blogs and different websites and emails, and then have that relationship with people up and down. You need to have a sense of accountability. So I've called Dr. Coley on dozens of occasions with ministry quandaries and asked for his advice. I've called other professors, Dr. Greg Lawson. I have colleagues that I speak to regularly that are other executive pastors that I speak to almost weekly. Hey, how are you doing today? Man, I've had a bad day. I've got this, and there's someone outside your ministry setting that you can vent with and that you can ask for tips. Hey, we're doing this, and I'm really conflicted of how to respond to this. And so being able to have those relationships with people that you meet along life's narrow way is so important. I tell the staff that I work with, every time I get in the vehicle, I have a list from my Outlook calendar of people to call. And when I get in a car, whether I'm going 3 miles or 30 miles, I always have 3 people to reach out to. So I'm either reaching out evangelistically, or I'm reaching out to a mentor, or I'm reaching out to someone. And so I use my task-driven personality, my delegation-driven personality, and make notes to be more relational, because relationships don't come as natural for me. It is. People say, "Well, you're good with people." It's learned. It's not overly natural for me. My natural tendency is I'm task driven, delegate, conquer, get it done. But I've learned you have to develop those relationships, and so I use that task driven personality of mine to use it to reach people. But there's ways you can develop relationships, and you can develop ways to create community. You can create relationships, and so hopefully that helps. It's just you got to be in community with other folks. Got to be in community relationship with Christ, with the local church, and then you got to have those mentors. And I just can't emphasize that enough. You can't live on an island. You can't live on an island as an Einstein, and you can't live on the island as a relational person. You've got to have relationships with people, and you've got to trust and listen to their wisdom and experience. And I have found that tremendously invaluable to me, and people pour into me that are different than me. And that is so important.
I appreciate that reminder, because so many times we think, when we see people that are really good at building relationships, or really good at something specific, and they'll think, oh, it just comes naturally. And it's not. It's all of these things are things that you really have to plan and prepare for. You have to take that time for preparation. Absolutely. And so it's really important to do that. And so I appreciate that reminder of making those notes and reminding ourselves these are the things that are important. We need to find a way to fit them into our day.
Yeah, I keep a calendar with people every day with relationships, and every week I'm developing a visitation list for people in the hospitals, rest homes, home visits for senior adults. But I'm also got time for staffing and other things that will come natural for me. If I sit at a desk all day, I will do task all day. But if
Yes.
I don't have my list over there that says you need to make some hospital visits, this is the day of the week I do hospital visits. This is the day I try to reach out. And so I
Right.
have to be intentional with that. And we don't need to forget, in all the leadership and all the courage and having the tough conversations and recruiting directors, it's all about ministry. It's all about leading children to Christ and having Christ-centered people serve in our ministry. And so I have to remind myself of that daily. And I just consider it a great joy to serve full time in ministry, and it has just been one of the greatest blessings of my life. And to be able to have the ability and the I guess the lanes to be able to do ministry and be called a pastor or be called a friend, and to be able to minister to others and to lead them. This world is we got to remind us as we leave today that we're just passing through. Our
Right.
citizenship is in heaven.
Amen.
And
Right.
we're passing through. And why are we passing through? To be vessels for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And so
Right.
we need to allow the Holy Spirit to work through us. And every day, whether it's whatever we're doing, whether it's taking our car to the dealership, whether it's filling up with gas at the gas station, or getting groceries at the grocery store, we need to remember we're ambassadors for Christ. Not just
Amen.
ministers,
Yeah.
but we're ambassadors for Christ wherever
We
we
are.
go, not just as vocational ministers.
Well, Pastor Ray, thank you so very much for joining us today. We were so excited that you were able to take some time to have this conversation with us and just to share your wisdom and to share just things that we really, they're the things that are so hard for us to learn how to do just naturally. We really do need that experience and that leadership to help us to be able to be stronger in delegation and in leadership. And so thank you so much for taking time with us today.
Well, it has been a joy, and I appreciate you two ladies having this platform, and I look forward to watching it grow and get other guest speakers on, and for me to learn as well, and also to be reminded. So appreciate y'all and your leadership in this format.
Well, friends, we're just so excited that you joined us for this conversation today. And we just want to remind you to hit subscribe. We're getting really close to those 100 that we need for our subscription. And so we are working hard. We are still learning and we're still growing, but we're getting there. And so we just appreciate that you're coming along for the journey.